This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 41.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba. When Ramsey is playing soccer and running full speed, the only way he can change directions is by running into someone.
Hello, SE Nation, and welcome back to another podcast. If this is the first time you're here, I am Ramsey Majaba. I'm a sales engineer out of Ottawa, and my goal with this podcast and website is to provide a resource for sales engineers by sales engineers so we can all grow together. Before I introduce my guests today, that's right, I have more than one, I want to remind everyone about the book club. In a few days, I will be publishing the first book review, and that will be on Thursday, January 31st. The book I'm reviewing is Mastering Technical Sales by John Kerr, which is commonly referred to, at least by me, as the SE Bible. So sign up to the book club to get more information if this is something that's interesting to you. I'm also going to open it up to book club members to send me their own review of what they learned, and I can share that with the rest of the book club. I will send more information to the people who signed up to the book club specifically, so that if you're not interested, you will not receive any information, but if you are, please sign up. As for today's guests, I'm chatting with John White and Nick Korte. Not only are they sales engineers, but they also have their own podcast called Nerd Journey. And they help folks with career path tips that they wish they had received as they're climbing their career ladder. A link to their podcast is in the show notes, which is at wethesalesengineers.com/show41. And as well as the notes and the books that will be mentioned in the show. So John helped Nick move into the SE role. And although they both work for the same company, they bring different experiences based on who they've worked with, who they worked for in the past, and where they actually are located. I really enjoyed talking to them, so let's jump into the show. Good morning, John. Good morning, Nick. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ramsey, for having us.
Morning. Appreciate it.
Morning. It is my pleasure. I've actually, I've listened to, I know before we get started, you guys have your own podcast. John, do you mind just stating what it is, what's called?
Yeah, absolutely. We are co-hosts on a podcast called The Nerd Journey, and it talks about basically us discussing the best career advice that we wish that we'd had over the course of our years, getting where we've gotten.
And that's how I know you guys. I listened to your show, you listened to my show, and we decided to actually hook up and have this interview. You're interviewing me, and later I'm interviewing you right now. But before we get started, the way I like to do it is maybe we'll start with Nick. And Nick, can you introduce yourselves to the folks listening and what you do? And then we'll move on to John.
So I'm a former math teacher turned IT pro who is now a VMware solution engineer in what we call the commercial segment. So that might be your small to medium business customers. But spent about 10 years in corporate IT doing system administration, kind of that jack of all trades. And about a year ago, made the move to VMware. And it's been pretty amazing since.
And John?
Yeah. Ramsey, thanks again for having me on. My name is John White. I'm a solutions engineer for VMware. I've been with VMware for about 3 years, and I cover the enterprise segment, is what VMware calls it, which is large businesses, not quite global in scope, but also not small or medium sized.
And have you always been in IT, or you did something like Nick and just moved around?
I think the very first real job that I had, like 40-hour-a-week job, was in IT. So it's been what I've done as an adult.
Okay.
Completely.
So Nick, what made you move from math teaching to IT and then to actual sales engineering?
So I taught for about 3.5 years, high school math. I thought it was an amazing job, still think it is. But, I kind of came to the decision that I didn't think I could be as dedicated as I wanted to be to that craft and be a good dad. So my wife and I wanted to have a kiddo. We do have a daughter who's now 9 years old. So I made the move to corporate America, and I did kind of a business analyst stint for about 6 months. And then I ended up getting hired at a manufacturing company that I had done some consulting work for in the past, and it was part analyst, part IT. And so I full blown system administration, and I really started to enjoy it, loved the dynamic aspect of it. In that way, it was very similar to education. So it seemed like the next best thing if I couldn't keep teaching.
All right, sounds good. So, John, what drew you to become a sales engineer?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a 15 years plus as an IT operations guy. Um, I went from small business to kind of a medium sized business as the business I was with grew, and it got to be where I was a jack of all trades. It wasn't interesting to be a generalist, so I picked a technology that I thought was interesting and said, well, I want to specialize in that. And then I had to think about the kind of role that I wanted. And over the years, technology companies tried to sell me things. And I kept on, asking very technical questions of the salespeople, and they'd always turn to the person sitting next to them and say something like, "Well, Jeff, how do we do that?" And then, after a few times and 5+ years, I always wondered, what is that job that Jeff has? And so that's how I found out about the role, and I went, oh, well, maybe I'd be good at that, specializing in technology and then helping other people understand how it works, when it's appropriate to use, and how much is the right price to pay for it.
So, how did you choose which technology to focus on?
Um, for me, I think I picked virtualization because that was the thing that I was most interested in at the time. It seemed to be fairly revolutionary at the time. I think it's kind of old hat now, but uh, I really thought it was going to change the world, and in fact, it did.
Oh, that's a good way to choose something. Nick, when you decided to become a sales engineer, do you remember the process you went through to actually apply for a job and find a job to actually get the job in the end?
I do. It was one of those situations where you put in your resume in the online portal applicant tracking system, or someone puts it in. Actually, John put it in for me because he and I had talked about what the role is like. He encouraged me to apply. Actually, I didn't really know what a sales engineer did. I remember hearing about the role, but I didn't know everything about it. And so he told me a little bit about it, mentioned that there were some openings in the Dallas Fort. I had him put my resume in, and then it was call with the recruiter, call with the hiring manager, two technical calls with people who were going to be on the same team, and then an in-person interview.
Generally speaking, from my experience, it's not every day where someone who has no background in being an SE gets a job as an SE. Why do you think you were able to get the job?
Well, I had done some consulting work for a company while I was still working in IT in the manufacturing industry. So I got a little bit of the pre sales consultation experience, a lot of post sales implementation too. But I actually don't see being a sales engineer to be that different from someone working the help desk. You are still selling people on the answer to the problem that they've put forth. You're making the sale of this is the answer to your problem, even though it's not what you think it should be. It's a good solution that will fix the issue that you've raised and help you do what you need to do.
So you leveraged your already existing experience and maybe spun it in a way for a sales engineering job.
Right. I found that relatable experience,
Okay.
was able to relate it to the sales process.
So did you actually do that in the interview, or did whoever interviewed you figure that out on their own?
So pretty much every person past the recruiter asked if I had sales experience. And I said, well, it depends on what you mean by sales experience. I've sold an idea, I've sold a project, I've sold the answer to a problem to an end user. All of that, you know, when you lay it all out, is selling.
Well, that's a good tip for everybody listening. If you're in support or something like that, use that experience as a transferable experience versus saying, no, I have no experience in sales. So that's a very good point. John, did I hear you correctly? You have over 15 years of experience in the with IT ops, but you've been as an SE for 3 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I think that for the first 10 plus years, I was with the, like I said, small business that grew to medium sized business. I left I had some moonlighting experiences the same way Nick did. And that kind of gave me the taste for maybe what that pre sales consultation job was. And then I was training to get a certification at VMware, and I think I put in my resume that I'd taken taken some classroom work for it or something, and a recruiter found my resume, um, and so I actually got a job working for a distributor in the sales channel for VMware, representing VMware products to resellers, and then I did that for about 2 years, and the contacts that I built there recommended that I apply for the job that I have today. So altogether, somewhere between 15 to 18 years experience, in my career. I, gosh, I sure it doesn't feel that long. Now I'm feeling old.
Yeah,
That's
we're not.
because you are old.
Ouch. Okay. All right. Well, I didn't say that. That was Nick, by the way. So you've been doing the SE role, whether it's through a sales channel or direct, for almost 5 years. What do you think has changed in your perspective about the SE role from when you started to now?
um, I would say that I don't think that I understood the pressure that salespeople are under before working with them. It's a pretty intense job. I have a lot of respect for the salespeople that I work for. Um, I think it's a trope that SEs say, I don't even know why we have salespeople. I could do that job. I I don't think that it's a job that I could do comfortably, at least where I am right now, for any length of time, career wise. Maybe I could cover for somebody, in a snap or something like that. But it's a very different job than the SE role, and I think that I was a little bit big headed coming in, thinking that maybe I'd teach these salespeople a thing or two, and I hopefully I tamped that down and just learned and everything that I could, before I could put my foot in my mouth.
So, two comments here. Almost every SE I know says that they can do the sales guy's job better than the sales guy. And I did the sales guy's job for 4 months. I didn't have a salesperson. It is not fun. Like, it's not about solving problems. It's just about calling people and hounding people until they actually answer you. And that's just a small portion of the job.
Yeah.
And the second point is that you said you could teach the sales guy a couple of things, which is true. SEs can teach salespeople a lot of things, but they can also learn a lot from salespeople with regards to the soft skills. So, if you have a good salesperson, it could be a good synergetic relationship versus a confrontational one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it right there. We can teach them things, but there's overlapping spheres of expertise, right? So my expertise might be in the products that I cover, but the salesperson expertise isn't in the deep technical details of those products and exactly what the minutia of what they do. It's an understanding in a general sense the problems that they solve, and what it sounds like when a company actually has a problem like that can be solved. So, and then there's a whole depth of skills and mapping organizations, and like you said, just hounding people for responses. I was guilty of that when I was in IT ops. I don't want to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
Don't answer.
Has you okay? I'll come back to that. So Nick, you've been doing the job for almost a year. is there anything that was surprising to you from when you started that you didn't expect as part of the job?
I, hmm, good question. So I didn't really understand how partners worked before this. I mean, as a someone who worked on purchasing IT services and different items for a company, I dealt with what we call VMware or Microsoft partners, but I guess I never really took the time to dig into what that means. And I thought it just meant reseller, but it actually means something much more in the services space. And so just learning that, sometimes partners are leading the charge and they have the better relationship with the customer than the representatives of whatever company you're with was interesting, and learning how to work with them and educate them as needed, and try and better your relationship with the customer as well.
All right. So my let me tell you my view of what a sales channel is, and you can tell me if that's different from what you expect when you started and what it is now. My experience is that sales channels are basically people who just put in the PO to us and receive the PO from the customer, but we do all the selling directly with the customer, like the actual demos and follow ups. Uh, is that different from what you guys see now?
I would say that it can go like that, but sometimes, if the partner's savvy enough in the particular product practice you're talking, they might be the ones who gave the demo and actually made the sale and just reached out to your sales counterpart to get a quote to the customer.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Ramsey, what you described is a partner relationship where somebody's just collecting taxes, right? They happen to be the partner of record, so um, please give me my 8% or 3% or 15% or whatever it is. So I think a real partner has depth of knowledge about the specific customer, their specific problems, the history of the problems, the politics of the organization, the map of the organization, the dotted lines, the process of purchasing. Um, you know, all of those types of intricacies at an organization, that's all added value for a vendor. And then, the other way around, a vendor can have a complex process of deal registration or a process of what they go through to actually sell something and qualify and come up with, a correct price or a correct part. So all of those things can be added value, um, and really good partners do those things. And then, some partners don't. So you just have to figure out and I have to say it can vary from person to person within our partner organization as well. So it's not a broad brush.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. Mainly a lot of times that if we're reselling a product that works with synergistically with our products, we kind of take the lead. But yeah, basically, bottom line is it depends on the sales channel that you're working with. So the good ones have the relationships and they use them. The bad ones are just the channel. Like, just pass me the puck and I'll pass it to the customer. And I'll just like play phone tag with you guys, give information here and there. All right. So a couple of things you mentioned, John. You said you worked in IT operations. Uh,
Yep.
can you explain to the folks who don't know what that means, what it means?
Yeah, I think that encompasses probably the types of jobs that 20 years ago we called um, systems administration, and maybe 20 years before that, um, computer information systems. So basically, the runnings of the IT department at a company or at an organization. So that's what I think of as IT operations. From the entry level of you know changing tapes for backups. Okay, that I just aged myself again. Um, uh, to doing Linux system administration or Windows system administration, or all the way up to now, know, managing absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
I think of IT operations as basically everything that it runs the gamut of um, low level system administration, um, operating system administration, backups, storage, networking, security operations, basically everything that goes into running an IT department at an organization. That's what I think of as IT operations.
So how was your transition from? And I'm not talking about like how you got the job, but when you once you started your job as a sales engineer, how did you transition your mentality or your actual skill set to suit the SE job?
Yeah, I think that at least my personality, it fit very, very well. So I don't think that it was that difficult for me. One of the things that I really enjoyed about the position was working on more than one problem at a time, um, and having lots of different kinds of problems and different kinds of business issues that I was facing, rather than the same business issue that I was facing at the one company that I worked for. Now, some people might um, work at a large enough organization, different types of problems. That wasn't the situation that I was in. So that transition from doing the same thing every day, working on the same types of problems every day, to working on many different types of problems for many different types of organizations, from technology companies to um, telecommunications companies to healthcare companies. Yeah, all those types of things. The different organizations, different politics, different problems that they're facing. So I think it was one of the things that I didn't realize that I was looking for until after I started doing it. And I went, oh, this is why this is better than what I was doing before.
So you didn't even know if you're gonna like the job. You just like took a shot, and turns out you do like the job.
I would say that part of it is that I think part of the operational, aspect of it, but I also really enjoyed working with the technology, the virtualization technology. So I think that even if it was working on, singular problems, at least I would be focusing in on technology, and that was definitely a step up of from where I was before.
Right. Nick, um, were there any skills that you didn't know that you needed to learn and then had to learn on the fly?
I think some of those in my case were product knowledge depth. The VMware portfolio is massive. And when you're a generalist like John and I happen to be, there are a lot of things that you figure out you need to know a lot more about very quickly. So I did not have exposure to the entire product line, so I had to do some learning on that. But also, just a little bit more about the business end of things and how C-level executives think and what they want to talk about compared to your typical, IT operations person, because that's kind of a different world. You do run into those C-levels that are really technical and want to get into the weeds, but oftentimes you are not talking to them about vSphere nerd knobs.
So you have to change the way you talk to different people.
Absolutely.
So how did you decide? You mentioned that you had like you didn't have the full breadth of knowledge of the VMware solutions. How did you decide what to learn next?
I think it came from a mixture of sources. I had a good mentor who shared with me, these are the things that my customers want to talk about the most. These are the things that customers are buying the most because they may just want to know about it, not necessarily purchase it. But after you after you have to say in a meeting, I don't know a couple of times, you get tired of being the person who says I don't know. So some of it was baptism by fire, like, you know what? I need to learn more about product XYZ because I had 2 meetings on it this week and I'm not going to not know next time.
Okay. Do you have any like specialist teams behind you, or are you the one line of defense to know all of that information?
We definitely do have specialist teams. So, think of me as technical generalist at like maybe a 200 or a little bit further. And then if it's past that, we'd probably bring in a specialist. So doing ride alongs with the specialists and listening to conversations that they were having with customers and the technical details. I was able to pick some of that up in that way, in addition to, self-learning.
Right. So this question is for both of you, but we'll start with you, Nick.
Okay.
What are the soft skills or the sales skills that you had to learn quickly, and which ones did you focus on learning first?
I think in my case, really trying to figure out what is the goal of the customer? What are they trying to do? Not just what product are they interested in. Focus on figuring out what is their overall goal of the team and organization, instead of just only thinking about the technology like you may get pigeonholed into when you're in operations.
Right.
So
John?
think bigger.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I think that it's a really good point that Nick brought up. I'd probably have a variation on that theme. It's um, thinking about um, business issues rather than technology issues. That was something that I think I learned, very very early on in my training, actually from VMware, in the boot camp that they put us through. And as a technologist, I was always interested in the next iteration of the technology. What does it do better? What is it? How is it bigger? How is it faster? Um, and and I would ask questions about that. But really, when it comes down to IT organizations and their purchasing, it really should be about what is going on with the business. What problem does the business have that there is a technological solution for, right? Not, oh, hey, this backup solution is twice as fast. Clearly we should get it. Well, is there something wrong with the backup solution? Is there something wrong with the time? Is the time that we spend doing backups costing us money? And if it is, but it's $100 a year, then maybe spending $1,000 a year on that solution doesn't make any sense. So that's the type of analysis and thinking that I had to learn how to do, um, and then present to a technologist and teach a technologist, my customer, to think that way as well, so they could be effective in their jobs.
There was one question I kept getting from customers for a little bit, and then I started asking myself before I talked to them. So what? Yeah, you can do this faster. Yeah, so what? Like, what's wrong with the way I'm doing it right now? That always stumped me with the so what question. So I started asking myself that and getting myself prepared before I actually ask the question.
Yeah, we actually have to think about, a problem and go in and solve it. And you can recognize a problem because it's measurable, right? It's usually measurable in dollars, uh, or currency, or time, or in a business capability that you're lacking. And if you can't measure your problem in one of those ways, then it might not be a problem. You need to probably think about it a little bit better.
Yeah, the big thing is that the customer has to understand that problem versus you knowing the problem and then the customer is not aware of anything. Um, is there a specific divide in the skills that you see that the sales guy needs and the SE needs, or is there a kind of a merger between the two?
I think that there's an overlap. That's probably something I'm going to say a lot today. Um, but I think that at least in my relationship, let me explain how I work with my salespeople. I cover two salespeople, so two sales territories, and each of them has about 5 or 6 customers. So they're fairly deep with those customers. That customer list doesn't really change that often. So they are doing a whole lot of mapping of those organizations, understanding those relationships. I don't have the time to do that because I have exactly one half the time that they have to do those things, right? So I'm, by definition, going to be shallower on all of those things. And then they're managing, the process of active sales campaigns that they have going on in a way that I can't be because, again, I have exactly half the time. So um, I go a little bit deeper in the technical and doing the validation of the solution. They're doing a little bit more discovery, and we're still doing a lot of the same things, but it's a matter of focus. So
Yeah, and I'll I would add to that, I think the tag team approach is good because I actually support 3 account
Hmm,
reps at the moment.
nice.
And I think you've all seen that the account rep can build rapport with certain people in a different way than you can. So you may build a really good rapport with someone in operations or a level higher and get all the technical details to make sure we don't sell this customer something they can't use or won't solve their problem. They may actually have greater success at building a rapport with someone a little bit higher up in the business. Sometimes it's the opposite, but a lot of times that's the way it goes. And sometimes I think I heard it on one of your previous episodes with a fellow named Rui, R-U-I.
Yeah.
He said something about, when the engineer says something, even if it's the same thing that the account rep said, it has a different impact because you're the engineer.
Well, because the
And
engineer said it, it's true, versus the sales guy saying it. It's then no, they don't know what they're talking
right,
about,
right.
which kind of sucks for them. Uh, so, do you guys are you guys? You mentioned right now somebody else, like the account managers, do the discoveries. Are you involved at all with the discovery process?
At least I am, John. So when again, our account list doesn't really change. At least the type of business that I'm in contrast to what Nick is in, I'm not out there discovering new customers. So really, what I'm doing is helping to discover new business problems that we can help with within our existing customer base, and that happens because our customers will buy another company, or merge with another company, or enter in a new line of business and have a new set of issues that comes up, or they have changing requirements. They mature as an organization and need to do something a little bit differently. So everybody is in a different place on that maturity curve and activity M&A activity curve. So um, we're always moving. It's a constant process. So yeah, I am involved. It's just maybe in a slightly different way than somebody like Nick is.
Yeah, and I would even say, John, that probably every meeting there's some discovery to be done. Whether you're consciously trying to do it or not, you're going to find something out in every conversation with a customer that will help. I'm not in every meeting that my reps are. Sometimes they like to be the first one to talk to the customer and then bring me in the next time, but I don't get to spend as long with each customer in my segment just because I have so many customers.
And are they Nick? Are they new customers, or like are you hunting for new customers every time, or is it also like a set list, named accounts that you work with?
It's both actually. So we have named accounts, and then we have some folks who maybe aren't customers at all today. We call them white space customers. So, but it's not. There aren't a whole lot of those.
Okay. Does your activities or role change between the named accounts that you already have versus the new ones you're trying to acquire?
I don't think it really does. I mean, we have to talk deeper about the migration path and things like that if they're using a different hypervisor, but I don't see a real huge change there.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is in my domain, which is not VMware, with my named accounts that I work with on a daily basis, my role changes quite significantly from pre-sales to post-sales, like to support them, to keep them happy. Whereas new customers, most of it is well, obviously pre-sales. There's nothing to do post with them. So yeah, that's the reason I was asking. Um, John, you mentioned M&A activities. Did I hear
Oh
you?
yeah, sorry. I'm talking in acronyms.
No worries.
That's how I'm in technology, right? So that's of course that's not a technology acronym. That's a business acronym for mergers and acquisitions.
Okay. All right. Well, good. You can tell how business versed I am with that. So, how do you balance the sales skills, learning new sales skills versus learning new technology skills? How do you split your time? And we'll start. This question's for both of you, but we'll start with John.
Yeah, I would say that right now I'm balanced on a pretty fine edge, 50-50, but it just really depends where in the product cycle we are. So right now our product cycle has been fairly stable. We've had some new releases and some things, but nothing, dramatic has changed. So, you know, keeping up with the technology changes has been fairly easy. Adding new things to the technology list, going from level 100 to level 200, that's something that I have to, kind of invest in, and I make a decision to do or not do. Recently, I've made a decision to not do. So mostly I've been investing in business skills. And I think, again, it's just where in the technology cycle you are. If we have huge releases and things change, or we buy a company, actually, that did happen in the past couple of years. Several times we bought companies, and I've had like maybe a 3 or 4 week sprint, learning um, that technology and how it at least how it applies to my customer list, and then filing that information away. But a little bit more long term, I'm thinking more on the business side right now.
Okay. Nick. Go ahead, Nick.
I would agree with that. I mean, I would also say that I think you should be open and adaptable to complement your account manager's skills. So if a person who really needs to polish up maybe on their sales skills, I'd probably dive deeper on because as you said, we're learning from them, they're learning from us, but we we also could serve as a technical resource for sales specialists. I don't know if in your organization you have sales specialists that are for a particular product, but depending on the geographical region, you may get to be the technical person for that specialist. And if you're deeper in a product area, that can really help product and make you more valuable to the whole team.
Sounds good. So one thing I struggle with, at least in my previous company, I only worked with one account manager, and that account manager knew exactly what I was doing every minute of every day. And if it was spending time to learn something new, they would prefer it if I'm visiting customers. Now, you guys are managing 2 or 3 account managers. So, how do you find time to actually learn anything new, which is important as sales, as technical people? We need to learn something new every day. How do you guys manage your time? We'll start with you, Nick.
So I like the Tom Limoncelli approach from Time Management for System Administrators, where he says take a piece of paper and write down an A, B, C list. So A is the list of things that must be completed today. B is the things I would like to get finished but may not. C is if I'm able to do it, cool, but it can definitely slide till the next day. So I like to try and make that list at the end of every day for the next day so that I can try and fit in what needs to be done. And as you said, it can definitely be difficult to do your training. So, block off some calendar time to do it. And sometimes for me, if I'm too busy, then I'm gonna have to do that training in the evening.
Okay.
And that's just how it has to be sometimes.
So, is it Tom Minicelli, or did I just butcher it?
Tom Limoncelli or Limoncelli,
Okay.
however you say it.
All right. Well, I'll reach out to you later for actual spelling, because I suck at spelling. John, how about you?
Yeah, I think that blocking off calendar time is really important, but also having a relationship with the reps so that they understand, why it is that you're doing that. If they don't value you keeping your technical chops up, during work hours, then there's a culture problem, or a conflict in their expectations. Because, one of the realities is that we are not compensated the same way that they are. They're compensated purely on sales, which means they want to get in front of customers 100% of the time. And and I think they're maybe what I'm saying is they're generally they're more highly leveraged. Like they might make like a lot more of their paycheck out of commission, and generally the sales engineer is a little bit more stable. So you know that implies that we're doing different things, right? So management is incentivizing them to spend more time selling, and management is incentivizing someone like me to spend more time, being technical and staying up to date with that. Because there's sprints, right? I can be not studying and not keeping up to date for a month, 6 months, probably not more than three, right? Before I start to look like an idiot because something's changed, not just with my product, but with the industry as a whole, right? So um, imagine being selling servers and not knowing anything about virtualization, 10 years ago, and then not feeling like you didn't need to know anything. Um, well, you'd probably be in a world of hurt. So um, I would say that having that relationship is a big part of it. And then also, the company that you're working for, does your company that you are still up to date? It's part of one of the reasons why I enjoy working for VMware. I think I told Nick when he was onboarding, get ready for the fire hose. They take us out of the field for a week every single quarter, for 20 plus hours of technical training. So um, it's uh, it's something about where you work as well, and what the company is signaling it values. So it's all of those things.
So from so we can't control the company culture, right? We can participate in it, but we can't. As individuals, we probably can't change that. But the things that I liked you guys mentioned, and I loved, you both mentioned blocking time, and I actually wrote an entire blog post about like managing your time and blocking time. And John, you talked about open communications with your account manager. So here's a small. I know I'm interviewing you, but I'm telling you a story right now. Uh, One of my mentees, he was getting bombarded with demos on like, hey, tomorrow we have a demo. Hey, tomorrow we have a demo, and we had a chat with him. And in the end, he went and talked to his account manager. He told him, hey, man, do you want a demo or do you want to close deals? And that's all he had to ask. And
Yeah.
at that point, I'm like, yeah, you don't need a mentor anymore. You're done. You're golden. I just learned something from you, so that was awesome. All right.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I remember hearing you talk about, in the past having relationships with account execs who just wouldn't tolerate you even, studying. And I think that's an issue, right? You know that you're in a not a good situation, or somebody who just doesn't understand what it is that you do.
Yeah, and it happens. You open communication. You either get into a fight and learn that you need to move on, or you guys work it out and live happily ever after. So I do want to transition to the not so fire round, but in my notes, John, you mentioned that you moved to San Francisco Bay Area for this SE job,
Oh yeah.
and you have some tips that you can offer people who are moving into a high cost of living area for an SE job. Uh, I don't know how to ask you that question, so I'm just gonna say go.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, part of what Nick and I talk about in our podcast is in those areas when you have a mismatch. Um, sometimes the answer is to find a better job. So one of the things that I'm advocating is if you are in a bad culture position, that you should look around and see if there's organizations that have better culture. Oftentimes, if you go the SE path, those positions tend to be in areas with high concentrations of technology companies, and as a result, higher pay and then higher cost of living. So, if you are going to do that, I would just encourage you to really understand what the differences in cost of living are, what your rent or mortgage is today, and what it's going to be if you move. And that delta, you really need to see it reflected in your pay, right, in the compensation, and probably closer more in the base compensation than any kind of variable compensation. And then when you do the math on that, you need to figure out, are you actually getting a raise, or are you taking a step back? So it's just things that you need to understand. And so in my case, for example, I wanted to work for VMware. They offered me more money, and I took a look at it and I went, oh wow, you know, where I'm moving from and where I'm moving to, I'm actually not getting a pay raise at all because of my additional my rent is going to go up so high, and then actually I might be a little bit behind, and maybe I want to work for this company, but do I really want to work for this company and be willing to pay $5,000, take a $5,000 a year pay cut,
Yeah.
And if you don't do the analysis, then you walk into the situation blind, which is horrible. To maybe a couple years later realize that you took a pay cut. It's the worst situation to be in.
Yeah, and there's a lot more factors I guess you could take into consideration. Like, hey, the culture. Like, is the culture worth taking a 5K pay cut for it, and that sort of thing. And, but
Absolutely.
yeah.
For example, there's definitely things in my life that I would take a $5,000 a year pay cut for. For example, if my employer said, "Listen, you're never going to work, more than 35 hours a week,"
Sold.
right? Would I take a $5,000 a year pay cut for that? Probably.
Yeah.
Or listen, we offer, in some other way, much higher retirement benefits or much better health care. So those are all the types of things that you need to take into account. Total compensation versus your total cost of living, and do the math on it.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I would encourage listeners to read John Nicholson's post about, so you're thinking about taking an offer, here's what you need to know. A lot of that stuff is covered in there about comparing what total compensation really is when you're thinking of taking a job.
Okay, I'm gonna reach out to you for that link for that post as well, or I can search it.
Sure.
Awesome. So, all right, time to transition to the not so fire round. Okay, that was. I'm still working on the dramatic portion of that, but it's getting there. So maybe Nick, I'll start with you. Other than a notebook and a pen, what is an essential tool a sales engineer should be using?
I would say that you definitely need a power bank for your phone. Seems like mine can't hold the charge all day when I'm out in the field and taking calls in between meetings. And I actually got a Bluetooth keyboard for the phone as well.
Huh.
So if I don't want to bust the laptop out or if I forget it, it's pretty nice.
Nice. Do you travel a lot?
I I travel a decent amount. It's not out of town, but in town I'm driving around.
Right.
So maybe 60% of the time.
Okay. And John?
Yeah, I have to say that for me, I've transitioned to Microsoft Surface Go, and I'll include my referral link in
Okay.
my background supporting documents. So I've completely transitioned to using it as a travel laptop. So I leave my laptop at home. I carry this thing around. It's like it weighs like a magazine or something like that, right? And for people who prefer to write, um, it actually has handwriting recognition mode, so it works really well in that mode. And at the same time, you can be doing digital capture for search later on. The one thing that about my notepad that was not useful was actually finding the note, right? Because I couldn't control F and do a keyword search. I'm really happy with it. It's USB power delivery, so USB-C, just like my phone, so I can bring one charger with me. So no heavy laptop, no power brick for the laptop, all in the form factor of a magazine. Pretty cool.
You can use Evernote and it will do hand recognition, right? If you don't want to pay X amount of dollars for a Surface.
Yeah. So the Surface you can do straight into Evernote. If you're saying, use something like an iPad or iPad Pro, Evernote's handwriting recognition isn't quite as smooth as the handwriting recognition. Like it's on the fly, like as you're writing.
Yeah.
So you write a word, it senses the word, it puts it in the note, Evernote or OneNote, whatever it is that you prefer to use. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Is there a book or resource that every SE should read?
I'll go first, I guess. So I know a lot of people have probably said you should read the Phoenix Project, and yeah, you should. But I would actually recommend that you read The Goal by Elihu Goldratt. It really talks about the theory of constraints and how it relates in the manufacturing industry. And when you read that and then you read the Phoenix Project, I think that really has a big impact in your understanding of, how the flow of work happens not only in manufacturing but through a technology department. I know having already read The Goal when I read the Phoenix Project really helped me understand it in a major way.
Cool. And John?
Yeah, I have. Nick had two recommendations. I have three.
Go ahead.
um, I I have a book that I read a while back, over 10 years ago, by Andy Hunt. It's called Pragmatic Thinking and Learning. Um, Refactor Your Wetware is the subtitle, and it really helped me, as in my IT brain, understand a little bit better how the brain works and how we learn. And then in that same vein, there's a book called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, and he kind of maps out how high performance people become high performance people. It doesn't really have anything to do with innate talent, or at least it doesn't for like 99.9% of us. It has to do with practicing the right way, good coaching, and then something being ignited within us to keep on doing the practice and keep on working and go forward. And then Daniel Coyle also wrote another book called The Culture Code, and it's about how high performing organizations maintain good culture. I'm only about a quarter of the way through that, so um, I can't give it a full ringing endorsement, but everything that I've read so far has been just amazing. So those are my three.
Nice. So the next two questions are, you already answered them throughout the interview. So instead, I would like to ask you to tell me a little bit more about your podcast and why you started it and who you're trying to help with that. John, if you will.
Yeah, so I think the stealth motivation behind doing the podcast for me was looking at the IT practitioner forums that kind of ignited my career change, and seeing the number of people who hadn't had a performance review in over a year, 2 years, 3 years, much less a raise. And lots and lots of complaints about feeling trapped, about being forced to be a jack of all trades without being happy, doing that. And it just kind of made me think, like, I changed my career, dramatically changed the path of my career. Um, Sales engineering is a much, I think, higher paying job than the traditional IT career path, and most people don't know that. So, you know, I wanted to at least educate people about um, igniting a change in their career. It doesn't have to be leaving the organization. Maybe it's a different job in the same organization, but recognizing one's in a bad situation, even if it's one of one's own making, you know, making the decision to change, and then the concrete steps on how to change. Um, how to write a resume, how to uh, go through that interview process. So I think I did it kind of informally with Nick, and then I went, we went through this process. We really should maybe like talk about it, like over and over again, and iterate on it and get better and better at it and communicate that. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that, but hopefully it made sense.
It makes sense to me. Nick, do you have the
I
same
can't take a
motivation?
lot of credit, honestly, because this was John's idea to start the podcast. I just am fortunate enough to be along for the ride. I have a joke on the podcast about the John White School of Mentoring, and I feel like I've been through that school, and that is part of the iterations that John talked about that we're trying to share with the world. So I'm just blessed and fortunate to be along for the ride.
Nice.
Yeah, it is kind of funny because Nick, called me up and he said that he got a job offer, and I was like, "Hey, that's awesome! Congratulations! Maybe we should do a podcast." Like, I almost in the same breath, in my memory, that might not be true,
That's the story. We're sticking to
in
it.
the same breath. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So it's called Nerd Journey.
Yes.
And you can find it pretty much anywhere you can find other podcasts, like iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you can join our audience of tens of other people.
Yeah. I have the same joke. You just took it away from me. All right. Awesome. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for coming on. I'd love to have more chats with you down the line, and keep up the good work.
Thanks so much, Ramsey.
Thanks very much.
I've really enjoyed listening to the podcast. It's been terrific. It made me jealous. I was like, oh, maybe that's the podcast we should have done.
Well, you can still do it. You can come
You have
on
some good
more
content,
often.
Ramsey. You're doing something right. It's helpful stuff. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. That means the world to me. Thank you. I'll see you guys on your podcast. Thanks, John and Nick, for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed having you on the show, and I've enjoyed listening to your podcast as well. So again, it is Nerd Journey. Link to it in the show notes. I really liked what Nick said about that even in a support position, he was still selling the customer on the solution to the problem, what he's doing to solve their problem. And he mentioned that to his interviewer, and that helped him get the job as an SE. So if you're about to walk into an interview, think to yourself, is there anything that you've done that can be transferable? Have you demoed something to someone once? Have you addressed a customer concern, which helped close the deal? Did you ever work with a sales team or an account manager? Anything can actually help you. So thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you sticking with me through 41 episodes so far, and I'm not stopping anytime soon. Show notes are at wetheSalesEngineers.com/show41. I do have one request, to leave an honest rating or review wherever you listen to the podcast. I really want to improve for you, to ask better questions, speak more clearly, or whatever it is that you think I need to improve in. So please let me know. Constructive criticism is always welcome. If you don't want to leave me a review, or you're shy, you don't want to embarrass me in front of anyone, I do appreciate that. I'm a big boy, I can take it. But you can still reach out to me directly, either through the contact form on my website, or LinkedIn, or Twitter, whichever is easier for you. My Twitter handle is at WeTheSEs. So thank you guys for being here again. I hope you enjoy Super Bowl next week. I actually don't know who's playing, but I'm going to be watching it for some reason, because it's fun. So whoever you're rooting for, good luck. With this is Ramsey signing off.